Welcome. We're in a different location, and also we've got members of the media here present in person for the first time in a while. So welcome to Southern Oaks and South OKC. And we're also seated, a little different look. Dr. McGough and I don't make these kinds of critical decisions. We just do as we're told. So today we were told we're going to sit down. So I hope you find that as relaxing as we will. Well, I wanted to update on a few things today, and it shouldn't be too long, but it is somewhat meaty. At our press conference 8 days ago, I pledged we would continue to monitor the recent spike in new COVID-19 cases. Since so many of our June cases were occurring among younger people who generally do not have as severe a reaction to the virus, we said we would also be closely monitoring hospitalizations and deaths. Here is what has happened over the last week in those key categories. And please keep in mind, when I talk about data, my focus is on the Oklahoma City metro, not statewide. Blessedly, deaths have not increased in any significant way. We mourn every one of our residents lost to this virus, and we send our deepest condolences to the families of those we have lost. Over the last 5 weeks, we have lost 6 of our metro residents to COVID-19. In the same length of time in April, we lost 62. Deaths remain relatively low this month. Regarding new case numbers and positive testing percentages, both categories went into a mild decline for a full week. However, those declines have now stalled, and the numbers look to be heading up once again. And though we did experience some decline, it wasn't as dramatic as the rise. So new cases still remain at an elevated level compared to the rest of the pandemic. Regarding hospitalizations, after the increase that was in many ways the cause of last week's press conference, total hospitalizations for the OKC Metro have remained almost perfectly flat for a full week now. We are very glad they have not risen further, but they have also not dropped at all and remain at an elevated level compared to the rest of the pandemic. You may also recall that last week we shared the 7 activities that were contributing to the case rise in June. That list was based on the investigations conducted by our city county health department. This is information we didn't have in the early days of this pandemic. We no longer have to speculate about what activities might spread the virus. We now have thousands of cases we can look at and know exactly how the virus is spreading. Last week, we talked about weddings, funerals, house parties, bars, churches, gyms, and small gatherings. Since that time, 2 sources of outbreak in particular have really stood out to our epidemiologists: restaurant and bar workers and bar patrons. This new information is perhaps no surprise based on the younger demographics of our cases this month. So, we sit here now with this as the overall situation. Escalation that we feared a week ago has not materialized, but neither has the depth of decline that would cause us to breathe a sigh of relief. We are stuck at an elevated level that in and of itself is manageable, but puts us right on the edge of an unmanageable situation. And with a holiday weekend looming, that precipice is an uncomfortable place to be. Thanks to data, however, we believe we see some simple interventions that could help us bring the numbers back down. As such, we are going to use the dimmer switch, and I will be issuing a new proclamation that incorporates some measures that are targeted and tailored to the situation as we find it today. These measures will commence Friday morning and will last for 2 weeks. Here are the provisions. All employees of restaurants and bars shall wear masks. This affects a finite number of actors in static locations, and so it can and will be enforced when we receive reports of systemic violations. Bar capacities shall be lowered to 50%. A bar will be defined as those designated as a Type 1 facility by the Able Commission. This affects an even more finite number of actors in static locations, and so it can and will be enforced when we receive reports of systemic violations. Any venue with theater-style seating shall return to staggered seating. This means either the closure of every other row or the functional equivalent, with at least 2 seats between separate parties. This will hopefully help counter the spread we're seeing at weddings, funerals, and churches. These measures I have just described are simple and easy to follow, They are targeted and proportional, and they are carefully crafted in such a way as to address many, if not most of the cases we are currently seeing. These measures are based in data and science and have been developed on the advice of public health professionals who are deeply engaged with the reality of the situation here on the ground in Oklahoma City. Keep in mind, when you're at the types of events or places I've just described, or any other situation, it is not a mystery how we transmit this virus. The most dangerous activity is simply having a conversation with another person where tiny droplets of saliva are spread. You cannot see it with the naked eye, but whatever the situation, when you are talking to someone and you are not wearing a mask, you are transmitting the virus to that person or vice versa through these tiny droplets of saliva. It is just as disgusting as it sounds. And if catching the virus doesn't cause your alarm bells to go off when you find yourself in those situations, just picture someone spitting all over you as they talk. Because if they are not wearing a mask, that is in fact exactly what they are doing. In order to significantly diminish the chances that you will unknowingly transmit the virus to others in a broad spectrum of situations, I am asking that all residents wear a mask or cloth covering across your mouth and nose when you are in an indoor public place and less than 6 feet away from other people not of your household or your family. I recognize there is no practical way to enforce this request, but I hope that by making it publicly, I will help to establish the societal expectation that we expect our friends and neighbors to do the right thing. Let me also add that private businesses absolutely have the right to require masks, just as they require shoes and shirts. I encourage them to do so, and we will be there to support their private property rights. This latest spike in cases has reminded us that we will live with this virus for a long time, likely years. Much like the threats posed by other public health challenges, such as foodborne illness, this pandemic is part of our lives now. Long-term challenges must ultimately be addressed by regulation that has been adopted by elected officials through a democratic process. Though I am taking these measures today through the emergency powers afforded to a mayor by state statute, city charter, and ordinance, the utility of emergency powers is nearing its end. Outside of extraordinary emergencies, this is not how American policymaking works. This pandemic is an extraordinary challenge, but it is transitioning from emergency to way of life. It should be normalized and addressed as such. Therefore, I have asked the city manager to arrange for a joint meeting of the City Council and the Oklahoma City County Board of Health and its executive team in order to discuss potential adoption of ordinances that will replace the emergency proclamations through which we have mitigated the spread of the virus to this point. Such discussions shall include what measures may be needed, who has the authority to adopt them, how they will be enforced, and how they might be adjusted in order to respond to trends. Though we know very little at this point about the tiered system described by the governor yesterday, no doubt that will be something we will want to incorporate into our discussion as well. That meeting and potential ensuing actions are expected to occur this month. In the meantime, I remain committed to our mitigation efforts, even as I work to transition us to a more democratic approach better suited to the long-term challenge that this pandemic has become. A final word before I turn it over to Dr. Patrick McGough, Executive Director of the Oklahoma City County Health Department. This is a holiday weekend coming up, and arguably this most recent spike began a bit after Memorial Day weekend. We can't sustain another spike on top of this one. Please be careful and recognize the seriousness of this virus, especially if you're a young person. This weekend and every day, wear your masks, wash your hands, and keep your distance. And now, Dr. McGough.
Thank you, Mayor Holt, and thank you for your leadership. Yes, we hit a threshold in our county this week that is alarming. Our case counts are doubling compared to previous weeks. As the positive cases continue to rise, the Oklahoma City County Health Department's epidemiologists are learning more each day about where the virus is circulating and who is being significantly impacted most often. Last week, We cautioned everyone to pay close attention to the Serious 7 locations from where many of our positive COVID-19 cases were being traced. The information was collected from the conversations our contact tracers have with each person testing positive here in Oklahoma County. We want to provide this information so that everyone is aware and can take precautions should you choose to participate in those activities. It is important to note that not every organization represented in the Serious 7 functions the same. There are some Serious 7 locations, take churches for instance, that are doing phenomenally well in practicing social distancing and members are wearing masks. However, other churches haven't been, and we have seen significant outbreaks at some of those. There are some gyms in our county that haven't had one positive case, but many others that have had multiple positives. This is why we need every business to do everything in its capability to limit the spread through proper disinfecting and enacting preventative measures like mask-wearing policies, and why it is up to each of us as individuals to make good choices to protect our own health. Please also note that the Serious 7 list changes, of course, depending upon behaviors of the businesses and the patrons circulating, and it leaves individuals exposed at greater rates in certain venues. This week, as Mayor Holt just detailed, we're seeing an alarming impact on positive COVID-19 case numbers from two different sectors, bars and restaurants. Oklahoma City County is not unique in this trend, as cities across the nation are experiencing increased trends of COVID-19 transmission at bars and restaurants. In addition to the new guidance Mayor Holt just detailed, I want to remind the public that the Oklahoma City County Health Department has statutory authority to inspect and license food establishments. And during the COVID-19 pandemic, as part of our statutory authority, the Oklahoma City County Health Department has investigated complaints of employees working while sick at food establishments. If an inspector determines an employee with COVID-19 symptoms is working in the establishment will be asked to remove the employee. The inspector may also request the facility to close for 24 hours for cleaning and sanitizing of the establishment. When we receive a complaint that a business has a sick employee working, our process is as follows. We visit that facility to perform an in-person inspection and determine if the employee has been removed from the facility. If not, we document, obtain the name of the sick employee, and assign for further investigation. If the employee has been removed, we will then remind the business the importance of cleaning, sanitizing, washing their hands, and wearing masks. We urge employees to recognize the critical role you have in slowing the spread of the virus in our community. Employers should never force a sick employee to continue working. However, we continue to receive such reports. This is a tremendous risk to the employee, their colleagues, your business, and our economy. We urge all businesses to remember it is extremely critical you give your employees the time they need away from work to recover from symptoms they may be experiencing related to COVID-19. This is particularly critical for businesses where employees work in a warehouse or assembly line format. Our case investigators are seeing significant upticks in the numbers of exposures occurring in these types of work settings. One sick employee can cause tremendous domino effects, forcing the entire business to shut down due to the spread of the virus. Keeping sick employees home is not only good for the public's health, it is good for business and the economy. Tracing how these workplace, private events, and personal activities are contributing to the fast spread of the virus in Oklahoma City and throughout Oklahoma County is critical so that each resident of Oklahoma County has the information they need as they go about their daily lives, determining where to spend their time and how best to protect themselves from the virus. As reported last week, we continue to see sharp increases in the number of young people testing positive for COVID-19, specifically those 18 to 49 years old. As we approach the 4th of July holiday weekend, I beg you to please remember to practice the following preventative measures. Avoid small group gatherings of individuals who are not your immediate family with whom you live. We continue to see outbreaks for small dinner parties and other type house events. If you choose to attend a small group gathering, please wear a mask as much as possible and distance yourself at least 6 feet from others and wash your hands frequently. Please limit buffet-style eating. If you plan to host a small group gathering, ask your guests to bring their own food and drink. Limit the amount of food and food containers that are shared and touched by multiple people. Finally, if you are ill, please stay home. If you have had symptoms of COVID-19 and you are waiting on a test result, stay home and limit your contact with others this holiday weekend. Keeping our economy open depends on each one of us. If you want to continue this new normal we have, where we can make the choice to eat out at a restaurant, shop at a favorite retail, or return to work, we must remain vigilant. Wash your hands, stay 6 feet from others, and wear a mask. And I want to clarify that to the extent that OCCHD is encouraging our community to wear masks, masks are simply a barrier for saliva, spittle, droplets, whatever you want to call what comes out of your mouth when you talk, laugh, sneeze, cough, or sing. It is that simple. I will close again with the same declaration I made last week. Wearing a mask is a statement that you value not only the lives of others, but that you value your own. It is not a political statement. Thank you.
Okay, we'll take questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
So the governor has made it really clear that he's not going to mandate masks.
Mhm.
He also said that he was going to give local municipalities, free will to do that if they want. I know that question's been posed to you several times, but considering, new data that you've been looking at, is it something that you're possibly considering? Because you guys are urging people to wear masks, but would you ever mandate it?
Well, whether you use that word or you don't use that word, in the end, you're doing the exact same thing. You're trying to persuade and convince people to wear their masks because there is no enforcement mechanism on something that every individual does. And so, to me, I feel like that's essentially where we're at. We are trying to get people to wear masks by leading by example, by bringing it up at every single possible opportunity, by bringing other influencers into the conversation. And I commend the governor for, really making setting a good example yesterday and really making a point of that. But his point and many others, in saying that there would be no way to, enforce it is simply the case. So, I mean, I'm aware other cities have used that terminology, but they're not enforcing it either, and because there's no way to enforce it. So, from the very beginning here of this whole pandemic, I have expressed that, so much of this, especially when it gets to the individualized level, depends on your own willingness to abide by societal standards. And we all wear pants and we all wear shoes every day, but if we chose not to, there's very little I could do about that either, and so societal standards are what keeps a lot of things running in this country, not police officers. We can't go out and enforce every single standard by which we should probably live. And so in this case with masks, I think we're doing everything we possibly can within the bounds of the society in which we live, and we're trying to get people to do the right thing. And I commend all those, I think, who have stepped up, and I think you can notice a cultural change in this city just in the last couple of weeks, and I hope we can keep it up. And your viewers can't see this right now, but every member of the media standing in front of me right now is wearing a mask, and I think that's great, and I think I see more and more of that out in our city, and I think that expectation is increasing. And one thing, that I said in my remarks, which I think is important to drive home again, is that, every business, every private landowner in this city can set conditions by which people enter their property. Otherwise, they are a trespasser. And if private businesses in this city want to become enforcement agents, we are there to support their private property rights as we are today for other reasons, you know. And so I think we're prepared to do that, and we encourage businesses to set that as a standard for entry onto their private property.
Okay, are you, guys, I have a microphone, so when you have a question.
I'll try to restate, I guess, after you
I've
ask.
got a mic now, Mayor.
Oh, you do have a mic. Okay. We'll get.
Just a quick question. So can restaurants or bars, will they face penalties or fines if they're found with employees not wearing masks or with more than 50% capacity?
So just as it's been from the beginning with these emergency proclamations, you know, you have basically your default fine. And the reality is we have yet to write a ticket. You know, we've been in a period now for about 2 months where we had no real enforceable restrictions, and now we're returning to some. But back in that March, April time period when we did have, and May, when we had enforceable restrictions, you know, what we found was when we had reports of clear violations of the proclamation, our police officers responded and always were met with compliance once a conversation had occurred. That's always our preference. We're not funding our city budget through COVID tickets. You know, I mean, we're trying to work with people and hopefully achieve compliance. And I have every expectation that in this case we would as well. And I don't necessarily anticipate a lot of pushback, because I think everybody kind of recognizes that what we just detailed is very reasonable. It's very targeted. It's very proportional. It's not closing any businesses, but it is setting some standards at particular businesses that our epidemiologists are finding to be strong sources of the spread right now. It's based on science, data, and it's very carefully and proportionally done, which we are a little better able to do now than we were maybe on March 15th, because we have cases. We have real cases now and real trends to look at, rather than just trying to guess at where the virus might spread. I'm not going to name them because I don't want to muddy the waters, but there are things that we, you know, regulated in April that we're not talking about anymore because we're just not seeing cases from those things. And so, you know, good for them that they have managed either through their own, you know, best practices, or it just never was the source of spread that we thought it might be. But some of those businesses are kind of off the list right now. We haven't talked about them, you know, this entire June when we've had so many cases. So, but we do have a few that we thought would probably be problems in March, and they have been problems in June. And so we're responding in a very targeted and proportional way.
Oh, thank you. Clarification on what business owners can do. Aren't the restrictions where you say you can't come in without a shirt or shoes, aren't those rooted in health codes? And being that there isn't really a law underlying this mask requirement, what are business owners' rights in this regard?
Well, I think you're mixing things. I mean, I think, yes, there are probably health codes about wearing shoes in a McDonald's or something, but also as a private property owner, basically you can keep people out for any reason other than probably, you know, protected classes. I mean, you can keep people out because you don't think OU shirts should be allowed in your store, you know, or OSU shirts. I mean, it's your property. You can keep everybody out if you want. You just don't want to sell anything. So, you know, those are private property rights that can be applicable here. And in this case, you know, I mean, just think of it with gun restrictions. You know, the gun laws have built in the right of private property owners to keep people out if they're carrying a gun. I think in this case, you know, it's keeping people out who may be carrying a virus, and all that they're asking is a mask. And it doesn't really matter whether we consider that reasonable or not. I think we do, but the fact is, trespassing is trespassing, and we can enforce that.
Anyone else?
Yes, Bill. Hold on, let her get to the mic, Bill. We don't want to miss a thing.
I was trying to stay as far away as possible. I can't hear you online, Joe, so I'll stay far away from you.
Mayor, I was curious about whether city employees are being required to wear masks at the least during their workday. whether they're in the office or out in the field?
That's a great question. As you know, in our form of government, I'm not as tied into the, day-to-day operational choices of city staff. That's more the city manager, but we can get you an answer for that. But obviously, it would be my preference that they wear masks when around others. I want to kind of go back to something I said in my remarks, because it's really important. I'll see people really misunderstand the role of the mask sometimes. Let me stand up for the governor. I saw so many comments yesterday when he wasn't wearing his mask while he spoke, and somebody probably did the same thing on our Facebook live feed 10 minutes ago when I wasn't wearing my mask as I spoke. There's no one in front of me, right? So it's the mask isn't protecting me from catching the virus. The mask is protecting others from receiving the virus from me. And if there's no one within 20 feet of me, which is the case right now, especially in the direction I was talking, then I don't need to wear the mask. It serves no functional purpose. And I don't want people to do things that have no purpose. And that's never what I think either of us are trying to help people understand. So you may notice in my remarks, I said, I'm asking the people of Oklahoma City to wear a mask when they're indoors, because that's clearly, outdoor conditions don't generally cause the same situations. When they're indoors and they are within 6 feet of somebody that's, not from their household, because you just assume that line has already been crossed, and so if someone is in their office, and this is universal, this isn't just for City of Oklahoma City employees. If someone's sitting at their desk on their computer in their office or in their cubicle, they don't need to wear a mask. They're not talking to anybody, they're not interacting with anyone, they're not within 6 feet of anybody. But I do think in our office and in all offices across Oklahoma City, if people are going to have a meeting or some other gathering, or maybe you're going to get up and you're just going to go to the printer, but every time you go to the printer, there's always 3 other people there waiting on their printer jobs too. Why don't you throw your mask on? Because you're going to be near other people and you might talk to them. At the very least, you're going to breathe real close to them. And it's just a good practice. But you don't have to wear it all 9 hours of the workday, even when you're away from other people. But put it on when you're going, to interact with others. Just like in a restaurant, wear your mask as a customer. Wear your mask to the table, then you can take it off. And then when, your server comes, maybe you put it back on to make your order. And then you can take it off again, Just use common sense. I don't know how many times I've used the phrase common sense in these speeches over the last 3 months. Just use common sense. We're not trying to make people do things they don't need to do. We hope people don't do less than they need to do. We're trying to get people to find that sweet spot of personal safety and community safety.
Okay, thank you all for coming.
Thank you very much. Be well. Wear your masks.
Thank you.